everything that's said is a story. So just keep that in mind as I'm speaking, because it is just a unique interpretation of what's going on. But I think that one of the most beautiful things about going through the death of an individual self is that you see the absolute innocence, the impossibility of ownership and control in all of the things that you thought you were responsible for, that you did, that you said, those mistakes, those wrongdoings, the things that create a lot of guilt and shame and regret. This is the only place where it can really be seen for what it is. Impersonal, simply just what happened. And yet all of the relational feelings, no matter what they are, shame, regret, remorse, not only do they stop having this knowable, labelable the feelings are no longer solidified in that way. They're just allowed to be here. And they too aren't owned in the same way. It's different. They can just be here. And they're seen that they're just an effect of this illusion that I was doing everything, that I was actually here, in charge of this body, in control of this body, in control of what it felt and did and believed in at that time. I mean, if you really understood that you had no choice but to be influenced by your whole environment, and that you were never separate from your environment, that you are everything, not as an actual thing or a concept or belief or something mind made. It's so unknown, it's so vast, and there is no distinction or boundary anywhere to what this actually is. And so then you see that whatever story you believed in and whatever story it morphed into, it was never really the truth. So I could tell you a million stories, a million different interpretations of what happened in this lifetime. But I'll just give you one example. So one thing here that was so painful was there were moments in my life where I felt so alone. I didn't feel really connected to anyone. I just felt so alone. And because of a lot of what my friends and family and society were saying, that more experiences and more stories that you can tell, that's better than just having nothing to say. There's a perceived strangeness about you when you're not adding to your life story. You're not adding to what's happening. What's the next thing for you? You know? You have to have an answer. And so I would get into these experiences or have these experiences where I thought this is better. This is better than just being alone and not having much to say to people. So I would get into these things where I would get involved with people who were harmful or not to be trusted. And I didn't trust, but things happened anyways. And what ensued after that was a lot of shame, locking down, suppression, perhaps more self-hatred, more regret, more guilt, more numbness. And that's what it would result into. And so then eventually I picked up a story of it's a good thing. It's a good thing because it made me strong. It made me understand more people and be more empathetic toward people. And, you know, a part of that is semi-true in that I do feel like I can relate to a lot of people because yeah, those situations did teach me a lot. I was forced to be stronger in some ways just because I had to feel through a lot. I had to try to scramble for an answer because it was so miserable living. It was so miserable being separate, being me. It was so miserable. Even the subtlest aspects of being me, like I just could not. There was something a little bit intolerable about it. At least here. But when you are told these kind of stories and when you tell yourself these kinds of stories that this is the reason why this happened and it's a good thing, look at the positive, it's just another perspective that you're kind of believing to be truth. And I think it could be a good stepping stone to release some of the hurt, some of the shame and regret, to loosen some of the contraction. But the real freedom is to really see that there's no one there, that no story is truth, that you were never responsible for any action at all, and neither was anyone else. So then, where does the feeling of they did something really wrong to me, or I did something really wrong, where does the belief in that really stick for very long? Like, sure, it can come up, understandably. It's just here if it's here. It's not really absolute truth. It's not something to believe in and stick to forever. Because nothing is forever. And so all these feelings and stories are free to be here fully. And it seems like when they're really free to fully be here, because they just are here. In their own time, it actually does dissolve, it actually does go, and then it can pop up again. Here and there, you know? Whatever remnant of that story is here, it gets triggered, and it's basically simply an opportunity for it to be here. It's coming to go, you know? It's not coming to stay forever. It's not coming to say that this is the truth. It's just coming to go. And it wasn't me that was interpreting it in that way. Yeah, I was just seeing that that's really what was happening. As time and space and me was kind of being seen as not reality, it has nowhere to really land and solidify in the same way anymore, because nothing defined me. It was just free to fully be here if it was here. And there was such beauty in it. Beauty to see the story in that way, to feel everything in that way. Never felt like that before. Because, yeah, when the self is there, it can't really feel that stuff. That's what it seems like. Because it itself is an energetic relation to it. You're not fully feeling what is when there is this opposition or edge to it. It's like a reflection of it. It's like a relating to it rather than it is just it. It is just that. That's all there is. It's very different. So largely that's how it seemed like the story just ended up dissolving here. Not that I was expecting it or needing it to happen anymore. There was really a releasing of all of the, it should be this way, I expect it to be this way. I just didn't really know what was happening anymore, and all I could do was express and interpret and feel and allow. And then it was, more and more obvious that I wasn't doing any of it, and then it wasn't effortful at all because it's just what was here. There was no need to manage and control. Again, this is all a concept, but it just felt like the ultimate healing was the absolute death and dissolving of all of it. The end of the story. The end of me. And in the midst of all of that as well, it was seen that energetically, things were just noticed. The energy to try and get something, the need for something, the patterns here that we're still running, it was just noticed. And the past was seen a lot more clearly, because now all of that was arising without a center, without an owner. And you see it very differently when it's not yours. Then you see the past very differently. All the stories that you regurgitated, all the memories that were a specific way, that conjured up a certain feeling, they start to morph and change, and you realize and feel things that you never have before. You see so-called your part in it, and that you were no different than anyone else that had a part in it. That all of it was inevitable, that all of it was this interplay of the massive confusion and lostness of the mind and the beliefs that were just projected onto one another. But now you see it was all just empty bodies. So there was a different type of acceptance and this like tenderness toward Suzanne, toward the character, toward any character. Probably especially my parents, who I had a specific idea about. And that idea changed over time for sure as Suzanne was changing. But in the absence of an individual there and here, everything is seen in innocence. They were never bad. They were never good. I was never right. I was never wrong. It's just simply what happened. And as long as there's needs, beliefs, loneliness, desperation, a strong belief in wrong and right, a desperate need to be seen and heard. You see how innocent it all is, that it makes sense that that sense would be there because of what we all went through in childhood. Because there is no perfect childhood. That we're all wounded by being here. And maybe we don't even have to interpret it as woundedness, but it really is just what it is. And some stories are just devastating, you know? Yeah, and it's no joke when you go through this. You know, the so-called more trauma that there is, the stories may arise over and over. The feelings may arise more than, let's say, others who didn't go through something as traumatic. You know, relatively speaking, there are just degrees of that stuff. is a beautiful thing to finally see that there is no trauma in that sense. It's all just energy. And it's not yours. You're not defined by it. You were never a problem. You were never wrong. You were never unloved, even though it might have felt that way. You really are just beautiful just for being. And you know, when you feel that, really, like, that sounds closer to truth here than anything else. I know that's still just a story, but it's so quiet and unmoving that it's just obvious that this is all empty. You know, I've been sort of, just because of the circumstances, getting back into seeing more friends and family and people I would just understandably never really talk about this kind of stuff to them with. And you just see like, it's clear that there's no one in any body. There's no one there. It's just, you could really just notice those beliefs and ways of being that are expressed in their comments. And it's really not seen in a judgmental way. It's just noticed. For instance, like when someone looks at my life, not that they even really know what I do, just because I don't have the typical things, the societal things, yeah, someone made a comment about how I'm unuseful, and maybe it was partially meant to be a joke, but I think there was some truth in it from their side, from their perspective, that in their eyes, this life, this perceived life, was useless, or something to that effect. And it was subtly sad to hear someone say that to another. You know, just someone to say that, it's just unnecessary. And I knew that they are just really lost. So, and it wasn't taken personally. It can't really be taken personally. But I could remember how Suzanne would have taken it, and it would have been hurtful. It would have meant something, and it would have potentially become something that she would hold on to a bit, even if it was unconscious, and try to make her life worthy enough, useful. Because her tendency, or the tendency here, was, basically to feel like I'm not worthy. I need to prove myself. I need to be better. I need to be more perfect. I need to appear like I'm doing something of value. Like, because it was so difficult to take up space, it was painful to be seen and heard, even though that was probably the deepest desire here, to really be seen and heard. And so there was this constant push and pull, a denial of oneself, self-sabotaging, and yet really just not knowing how to mend this hurt. And it wasn't helpful from others around her that would, if they would comment, it would be comments of, yep, you're still not good enough, you're still not doing enough, you're not okay the way you are. That was the message constantly received. And that's how the person is. That's how these belief structures make you feel. Because if there's nothing, if there's freedom, if there's really truly just emptiness, everything that is just is. And there is no unworthy worthy. There is no value. What's the opposite of value? There is no special, unspecial. Like, it all just simply is. It's unbelievably simple. And so, there can be moments where it's just sad to hear these harmful, hurtful comments, and they're just spewed out as if it won't affect others. And perhaps they do want it to affect you because they really do believe that your life or you are unworthy as it is. And it's just really sad. And that's how this perpetuates. That's one little simple example of how this perpetuates. And then the self-hatred continues. The guilt, the shame, the desperate trying to prove oneself to people who don't even matter that much, because those thoughts and feelings are just a belief within that body, but there's no one there. They're just thoughts and beliefs. You are not beholden to anyone or anything, because there's nothing there. You're free. You're basically freedom itself. And you can't know that. You can't touch it. It just is. It's beyond any achievement. It's beyond any idea or concept of yourself. Anything that you can utter and speak of as an answer when someone says or asks, what are you doing with your life? What are you doing? Who are you? That's it? That's all you're doing? Yeah, and part of the beauty too was seeing how untouched and how unmoved it was here. That it didn't trigger anything. It was just seen for what it was. Like, there was equally just an understanding of why it is the way it is, and why people say such things. And there was a little bit of, it's kind of unfortunate, and it's also kind of seen like while it's really not necessary here, you know? Before, it felt like I needed things from people as well. So I felt like I needed to please them somehow. I needed this back and forth. I needed this interplay. But really, the needs here have diminished so much that for the first time in my life, it really feels like I'm on my own, but in a very beautiful way. I'm standing on my own for the first time ever. And it's not like it's not empowering in the way the person might think. You know, that interplay has also just neutralized. And so this is also just what it is, but it's obvious that interplay of pleasing another, getting from another, needing them to like me or approve of me, like that interplay just does not need to happen anymore. Yeah, so it feels like there's no outpouring of energy to do anything about that. There's no energy to set anyone straight. There's no energy to, prove anyone wrong or convince oneself that I am useful or there's just nothing. For the first time in this imaginary life, there's just nothing.